Phil, it's about 13 seconds now, something.
I think it's more like about 18 seconds. I have to look it up. The number of leaf seconds since January 1980.
All right.
If anybody gets bored after the meeting, we can go into that too.
All right. So we are live on the, yeah, there we go. We're live on YouTube, and we're recording this for posterity and such. So we will go ahead and get started. I will get that flag up here that I just created. And we will start with the pledge. If everyone will join me, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you all, and welcome again to the August meeting of Palomar Amateur Radio Club. We are conducting this meeting virtually only due to COVID and restrictions again, and some positive cases among members of the board and close contacts. So out of the abundance of caution, we're keeping everybody as safe as we can. All right, on to the agenda. So are there any, first of all, I'm going to recognize our recipient of the scholarship. That's Jacob Adler, KK6 MYW. So welcome, Jacob, and good to see you on, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Any first-time visitors with us today that have never joined us at a club meeting?
Yep.
Oh, yep. Go ahead, Jeremy. Welcome.
Yeah, Jeremy, NJ6Q. I'm Jacob's dad, and just wanted to also thank you guys for supporting him with the scholarship. It's great, and I've not come to your club meeting. We're down in PB, so it's always seemed far up in the North County, but this is great to actually be a part of it.
Great. Well, welcome. Always glad to have you. And of course, with our meetings being virtual and or hybrid, you're always welcome to pop in. And my family and I are down in PB every weekend. We go to Pacific Beach United Methodist, which is K6PBC. We don't have a station there, but we have a call sign.
Interesting. Cool.
Hey, Joe,
Yeah, go ahead, Charlie.
how about we let Jacob tell us a bit about who he is and what he's doing?
All right. Jacob, you want to give us an intro, your background in amateur radio and technology, and your goals with the scholarship?
Sure. I can start. I was licensed when I was 11 years old, with some help from my dad. And since then, I've not been maybe the most active, but I have definitely gotten to do some pretty cool stuff. I have heard the ISS downlink. I've done satellites. I'm also in Boy Scouts. I got to use I went to the, what's it called? The Jamboree in the Air. And yeah, I don't know. I've done lots of stuff. I can talk about that more. But I'm going to UC Berkeley this next year, and I'm planning on potentially taking some radio courses. There's actually two different courses offered by a professor about radio specifically that I was interested in.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. All right. Any other first-time visitors with us today? All right. How about brand new upgrades? Just got your general or just got your extra? Any new upgrades to celebrate today?
I just upgraded from tech to general.
Robert, congratulations.
Attended the 16th of July day crash course and testing session.
Oh, was that in Pacific Beach?
Yes.
That was at my church. Great. Yeah, I couldn't be there myself. I was there to open the doors and close the doors. But we had,
We didn't tear the place up any.
yeah, no, oh man, we love having the team there. Place is always kept immaculate. Fantastic, and happy to provide the space. So
It worked out well.
congratulations. All right, let's see. Announcements. The picnic is coming up, so check your scope for details on the picnic. It will be as usual at our location at San Dieguito Park in Area 4. And oh, I didn't get the scope on the web yet. I will do that during the meeting once I'm done talking. But it did come out via email a couple of days ago, and the date is going to be September 3rd, I think it is. Let's see, Park Scope, there it is. And yes, September 3rd, it'll be a lunch picnic. We'll get there in the morning, whenever, and have lunch, you know, to be determined, but you know, whenever everybody is there between 11:30 and 12. The club will be providing hot dogs and hamburgers and buns. And there's suggestions on what you can bring based on the first letter of your last name. So see our scope for those details. We'll try to get a tea hunt together. I think we've got some foxes out there to hide. And we will have some fun and socialize outdoors and socially safe. All right, any other announcements that I am blanking on from the group?
Joe, did I not hear the date a second ago?
You
The
did not
date
hear the date. It is a month from today, September 3rd.
Also, FYI, I looked at the calendar that you created, that nifty little calendar.
Yeah.
It doesn't show there's a meeting tonight. You might want to go back and take a peek at the calendar and make sure that the events are in there.
Well, that's because that is specifically the Nets calendar. If you go to the events page.
Got it. Sorry.
Yep. I do have on my plan to get all of the events into a Google Calendar that's shared as well, that people can subscribe to. I think I'm going to save that until we can find a webmaster who can migrate us off of this Joomla thing and into WordPress. WordPress just plays nicer with everything, and the events will plug into Google Calendar better than I want to try to learn from Joomla. So that said, if anybody is interested in taking on the position of webmaster for the club, please let us know. You can either tell me here or email board@palomararc.org. All right. Well, Mark, since you were just talking, you want to give us a repeater report?
All right. How's my audio?
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you. Well, our last task that Glenn and I went up and did was we pulled apart the repeater controller for 447, and turned out it was the controller for 146.7.3. A couple Saturday mornings ago, you guys, was it Saturday morning, Glenn, or was it? It was a weekday morning.
I think it was.
I think it was like a Tuesday or something. Anyway, oh, it was a Saturday. Anyway, we ripped the controller all apart, found some scratchy potentiometers and things, and it looks like they may have been up there long enough that we're starting to get a few hardware problems. So we cleaned it all up, turned up the gain again on the audio. The deviation was low, and 447 is usable. Although all of us that were playing with it think that the frequency response is down. There's no high frequencies in it. that it should have compared to 7.3 or 1.30. So it's going to go get another toothbrushing and cleaning of connectors and cleaning of bots. But I would say that 447 is back online. Anyone who uses it, I would certainly appreciate an email note to my call sign at Gmail. Just let me know what you think of it and any problems that occurred, for that matter, with that or any of the repeaters up there. Glenn,
What's the hardware, Mark? What kind of hardware is that repeater?
That is a Yaesu, one of the DR1X.
Okay, sorry, you cut out.
There are
It's
four
a
of them.
Yaesu. It's just like the ones on 2 meters, except the UHF version.
Well, it's actually the same repeater. It's a dual band.
Oh, okay, all right.
The repeater is actually made out of a pair of Yaesu FDM 400s.
Got it.
One for transmit, one for receive. What's inside.
Got it. Thank you.
And for as long as I'm rambling, they're putting out around 20 watts into a massive antenna tower. And if you just go to the front of the web page, you'll see a shot of the tower all covered in ice. So does that pretty much cover it, Glenn?
Yeah, Mark, just as an aside comment, we've been having troubles with that controller for some time, because that used to be the controller we had for 6 meters. And and it died. The whole third channel on that controller died. And I had to replace it with a dedicated controller.
I think I'll talk to you after the meeting.
Yeah, so the only thing I'll add is, Mark, you were right. I think we went on a Friday because there were no motorcyclists passing us at 60 miles an hour going up or down the hill.
Yay. Yeah, we almost didn't get killed one way. And the other thing I remember is that the general store, which means the bathrooms, were closed when we got there. And for those of you who don't go up to the repeater site, there's no water and no restroom facilities. So you depend on the water and the restrooms over at Mother's Kitchen. And when they're closed, you walk around with a big grin on your face most of the time you're there. Okay, I think that covers it. John, I will get back with you. I didn't realize that was the one controller that had been damaged.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mark. And while Mark was talking, I did go ahead and put the link to the August scope on the website. So if you go to palomararc.org, click on newsletters, then the 2022 AUG is now a link that you can click on and get the current newsletter. Great. So now, membership report. Glenn.
Okay. Today I finally sat down and entered 9 payments and or new members. Jacob was one of the new members added to the count. And I don't remember who the other person was, but the count for the club is now back up to 154 members.
Okay.
Yep.
And as always, if you're curious about when your membership might lapse, you can either contact Glenn or go to the website, and I think it's right on that join/renew page. Yeah, PARC membership check. We try to keep that updated. Okay, any other questions, comments, sarcasms, etc. for the group?
Comment.
Go ahead, Charlie.
The site has been very busy, mostly with Glenn and Mark, on taking the dimensions of existing structures, and a lot more work is going to go on in the next couple of months. I think, as everybody knows, we have a grant request to the ARRL under their new program of ARRL grant request. Supposedly, they will announce the clubs who have been approved beginning this week. I don't know when we're going to hear about our grant, but if we get the grant, there's going to be a lot of work going on up on the mountain. We have a small hundred of volunteers, about 4, including Mark and Glenn. We're going to need a lot more people to pull off what we're trying to do. Essentially, transform our entire site into a 21st century communications center. I ask all you folks who aren't old folks like me, who doesn't survive in the light atmospheric pressure at that level, to consider, if you have some spare time, to be part of the team. It'll all be voluntary, and they'll all be scheduled around your schedule. But we do need help. And it's a great opportunity to really get involved with the new technology.
All right. Thank you, Charlie. All right. Anything else? I will, if there isn't, I will go ahead with our introductions. Your scope editor is Keith, KM6CXW, who will appreciate any submissions that you have for the newsletter. Email to scope@palomararc.org. Repeater tech and site chair is Mark, KF6WTN. Glenn is your membership chair, AI6RR. Directors are John, W6XM, and Ron, AJ6FQ. Your secretary is Jim, W6TQS. Your treasurer is the other Jim, K2VO. Your vice president is Chris, KD6LF, and I am your president, Joe, K6JPE. Without further ado, we will turn it over to Anthony. Chris, do you want to give Anthony an intro here? Or do you want me to just read what's there? You're muted.
No, sure. Anthony's reason I asked him to speak tonight because he's been very, very active and acquired many awards on QRP and other low power modes. He's QRP DXCC total has topped the 326 mark, and he's completed 11 band WAS. He's a published author, and he's also very active with the ARRL Ohio Section Youth Coordinator. He has 2 websites, KAZT.com and ZTLearn.com, and he writes articles for a variety of publications, including CQ Magazine, DX Engineering, and is developing an online course for ARRL. He's given over 100 club presentations, and tonight he's going to talk to us about what is life beyond repeaters as a technician. So, Anthony, if you'd take it away, we'd appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. I'm now up to about 200 presentations for clubs around the U.S. and around the world, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. I'm also going to put in the chat the link to tonight's slideshow. There will be links in it that you'll want to click, and please feel free to copy that address in your newsletter. So I'm going to talk about something called Technician Life Beyond Repeaters, but it isn't just for technicians. It's also activities for anyone who's not tried any of these things I'm going to talk about today. So there'll be something for every license class. My contact information, k8zt@awrl.net, and my website, k8zt.com. This is local scenic railroad that I volunteer on as a trainman. This is my QSL card. Again, here's the link for tonight's presentation, tiny.cc/btech. So let's talk about maximizing your on-air experience. We'll go into exploring new modes, new bands, new activities, and ways to have more fun with amateur radio. So some informal observations, and I'm sure many of you had these same things. Most techs limit their operations to VHF and UHF repeaters with occasional simplex FM. Many get their licenses but fail to get on the air, or get on the air and burn out very quickly. Some upgrade their license, many do not. Sadly, some drop out of amateur radio completely. There's been a changing situation in VHF, UHF repeaters over the last 15 years. There's greatly decreased activity. Cell phones, texting, email, etc. have replaced the connectivity that was previously provided by repeaters and in some cases auto patches. And some of you may be too recent to amateur radio to even remember auto patches on the local repeater. But my wife and I, starting in the early 1980s, spent a lot of time on our local club's 2-meter repeater to the point where one time she was out of the car pumping gas, and my 4-year-old son heard KA8ODP, this is KA8NRC, and he immediately responded, KA8NRC, this is KA8ODP. He knew the routine very well from riding in the car with his mother and listening to us talk on the repeater. But sadly, most repeaters, my repeater's been on here, my local repeater's been on the radio here in the shack, and I have not heard anything except for one ID in the last 3 or 4 hours. Some repeaters have moved to DMR, D-Star, and Fusion, and we'll talk a little bit more about those later. And what about HF? Earlier, when you got your first license, which was a novice license, there was activity, on-air activity, typically included HF contacts and the CW subbands. I know that's how I started out when I got my license. I got my tech pretty quickly, but I spent a lot of time on the novice CW subbands. Tech engagement added 10-meter tech enhancement, which took place 30 years ago this last March, added 10-meter phone and data privileges, but this HF 10-meter band is very dependent on sunspot activity levels and is often limited to local contacts only. Now, fortunately, we're going into a good sunspot period, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. It seems some of the excitement of getting that first license may have faded along with the FCC's mailing of paper licenses. To keep the excitement, it's important that techs and other licensees get involved in a variety of amateur radio activities. Mentoring, not just licensing new hams, should be an essential part of all local radio clubs. Depending on your license, there's 3 paths you can take with tonight's presentation. If you're a technician, I'll provide you with a number of things to try. If you're recently licensed or currently semi-active general or class or higher, you can do all the things I'm going to talk about for technicians tonight, but you can even do them with more frequency and mode allocations that you come with your license. If you're already doing many of these things, try something new, and if not, mentor those in groups A and B above. So the current license privileges for technicians include some HF, 80, 40, 15, and 10 all have CW privileges. 10 meters has some phone and data privileges also, which we'll go into in detail. Now, everything from 6 meters and above, technicians have full privileges to all the modes, full power, with the exception of, depending on when they got their license, how they got their tech license, there may be some limitations on 1200 megahertz, but in most cases you have full privileges on the VHF and UHF bands. Here's a modified version of the popular ARRL webpage chart, but just showing the privileges of 10 meter that technicians have. So you'll notice that on these 3 HF bands, 80 meters, 40, and 15, the limitations are only CW. On 10 meters, there's data, CW, and phone all available. And on 6 meters and above, techs have full privileges. This is a little page. If you're interested in charts, I have a whole page here available with charts and maps, including that one you just saw, and lots of different ones. And these are all things you can get to by going to the link. That's why, again, you want to go to the slideshow presentation afterwards so you can click on the links. The links are shown as serif font. And they usually have this little symbol next to them. So the ARRL submitted a petition to the FCC requesting an enhancement of privileges for technician class license operators a few years ago. It included addition of phone and data privileges on a limited number of HF bands, and you can read the full petition. Here's what it basically breaks down. They're going to be adding, this is the current privileges, and what they would do is add Ridian data modes on 80, 40, 15, and single sideband on 80, 40, and 15. There's no new tech privileges on 20 or 160 meters, the work bands or 60 meters, and there's no change in power limits. But when is this taking effect? Well, no idea if or when it will occur, because this was originally worked on in 2016. The proposal was submitted in 2018, and the FCC posted a request for comments March of 2019, and no further action has taken place. So what can a tech do? Well, they can update to general class or higher to get other privileges, or we can explore some of the things they can do with their current technician license this evening. First, some myths about the technician license. The first myth is that VHF, UHF repeaters are the only activity, and we'll talk about a lot of activities you can do tonight beyond those. A lot of people think there's no HF privileges for technicians. We'll explore some of those HF privileges. Only code experts can make CW contacts, so a lot of people are intimidated from getting on the code portions of the HF privileges, thinking that they can't do it, but that's not true at all. There's no way to work DX. Well, you certainly can work DX on the bands that are available if you're willing to try some new things out. There's the myth that 6 and 10 meters are always dead. Well, they seem to be dead quite a bit of the years, but in good sunspot years they're there. But also don't forget about E-skip, which occurs every year, and there's quite often openings during that time. There's another myth that you can't work FT8 and FT4. You can, but it has to be on 10 meters and higher. 10 meters, 6 meters, and up. One of the most common infractions right now that are reported every month in QST are techs who decide to get on 40 or 80 and work FT8. There's no privileges there, so don't do it. It's not part of your privileges. There's another myth that microwave bands are useless, and some parts of the country there's not a lot of activity, but I know in California there is quite a bit. So let's look at some of the things we can do. We're going to explore new modes with some single sideband, some CW, some digital. We'll just mention fast scan TV and Wi-Fi, but we're not really going to go into those very deep. Look at some new bands you might not have operated: single sideband on 10 meters, CW on 80, 40, and 50. And if you've never operated 6 meters, lots of opportunities there. Some of the activities we'll be discussing tonight are simplex VHF, UHF, using the same radios that you use to get on the repeater, but making some simplex contacts. Satellites using VHF and UHF. Some contesting on a variety of bands that technicians have available. SOTA and POTUS, summits on there and PARCs on there are also done with VHF, not just HF. DMR, Echolink, APRS, fox hunting are all things that you can do on 2 meters and above. So here's the options that basically technicians have. They can either upgrade to general, or they can limit themselves to local QSOs. And you can do that with FM simplex or FM repeaters, but you're only going to be talking locally. You might get 100 miles, maybe even a little bit more, but not much more. For regional QSOs, there's a couple options. You can use linked repeaters, which increase the area footprint, or you can try single sideband and FT8 on VHF, 6 meters and 2 meters, especially during contest periods or special propagation modes. Sometimes you can get quite good distance on those. And the third option is for worldwide contacts. You're pretty much limited to HF bands, and that would mean that you're going to be using single sideband or 10 meters phone. The satellites, or using a system of amateur radio that involves an IP or internet backbone, for various repeaters. So these would be the ways you could get distant QSOs. By the way, before we even get started talking about this, if you're just getting started in amateur radio, we just got done doing a 3-week presentation for the Rat Pack group. The Rat Pack group has presentations every Wednesday and Thursday evening at 6 p.m. your time. And Wednesday nights are typically general information, and Thursday nights are emergency communication. But we just got done doing a full slideshow. It's about 130 slides, and we did 3 weeks, and all 3 weeks are video recorded and available on YouTube on Beginner's Guide to VHF and UHF. And some of the things I'm going to talk about tonight, there's a lot more detail on those in the Beginner's Guide to VHF and UHF. So again, this is pretty much the same thing I had on that chart back there. So let's first start with FM simplex. Using the same radio that you're accessing the repeater with right now, you can actually also do some simplex activity. Simplex is a great practice for emergency communications. It often doesn't require a new radio. Let you experiment with amplifiers and amps, antennas to see how far you can actually get out without using a repeater. Many local clubs and organizations hold 2-meter FM simplex contests on a regular basis. Often they're grid square based, but I'll talk about another thing that our club just started doing when we talk a little bit about contesting later on. And there's some videos here available on simplex FM. When you're using simplex, don't just tune to anywhere on the band that you have privileges. First of all, remember on 2 meters, the bottom 100 kilohertz are reserved for CW only. And then there's also some other portions of the band that are reserved for weak signal operation. So stick to the FM simplex frequencies when you want to operate FM simplex. And California has 15 kilohertz spacing, unlike most of the other Western states where they're using 20. But you'll notice that there's some frequencies that are common on both. So that doesn't mean you can't talk to someone in Arizona. Just pick one of the green frequencies that are available in both charts, and that will be the right spacing for both of you. The national calling frequency is 146.520, and I always have one band in my dual band radio in the shack here set to that, just listening. And I made about 120 mile contact the other day, and I don't have a very fancy antenna, just a little vertical on the house here. Bob Witt, K0NR, talked to our club via Zoom last year, and he's very big into VHF summits on the air, and he likes to operate both FM and single sideband, and he has a lot of great resources. There's a resource here called Getting Started on 2-meter single sideband from Bob that you're welcome to go to. Single sideband is used quite a bit in contesting, weak signal operations, and some satellites. Many of the satellites are FM satellites, but there's also some what they call digital transponder satellites that use single sideband and/or CW. One of the things to note, though, is when you're using single sideband, antennas are usually horizontally polarized versus the way they're vertically polarized. So I can tell you right now, just looking at this picture here, Bob is operating 2-meter FM here. That's why he has his antenna facing vertically. VHF contesting, most of the activity is on single sideband and FT8 and FT4, but there is some CW and FM activity. And FM is a perfectly good mode for the contest. I'll talk a little bit more about those in a few minutes here. Satellites, with the exception of a few very old satellites, technicians have full privileges on the satellites. There's 5 main types of satellite communication. Low Earth orbit FM-based satellites, which are probably the easiest ones to use, and you can use that same radio that you might have already, that dual band radio. LEO linear transponders use single sideband and CW, so you would need a different radio. Higher orbit linear transponders, for those of you that have been around for a while, I spent a lot of time back in the 80s on Oscar 10, which was a high orbit linear transponder satellite, and it gave almost worldwide communications. Geosynchronous orbit satellites, and there are currently no high orbit linear transponder satellites available for hams, and there is a geosynchronous orbit satellite available. That's one that stays in the same place, but it stays in the same place in District 1, which is not our AIRU district. It's over Europe and Africa, so we don't have any geosynchronous satellites we can use. The space station acts as a two-way repeater, very similar to a satellite, or you can also have contact with the astronauts themselves. These are all things a technician can do without a lot of expenditure, without a lot of work. This person here is using a dual band antenna. You can't see the 2 meter elements because they're pointing at us, but this is a 442 meter commercial antenna called an arrow antenna. And this is what I suggest you start out with, is the low Earth orbit FM satellites. Much easier to get started with, and it's probably a radio that you might already have. Sean Kutzko, KX9X, has a great series of blogs he wrote on operating satellites, and he also created a set of corresponding YouTube videos for them all. So this is a great place to get started. Here's Sean out in the field, and he's using that same commercial arrow antenna there. What do you need to do this? Well, you need a dual band FM, HT, mobile, or other radio. If you have a base station like the FT991 or portable like the FT818, the ICOM 705, 7100, 9700, any of these would work just fine for the low Earth orbit FM satellites. You need an antenna. You can go with a commercial antenna and spend about $125, or you can go for the $4 DIY special, and even there's a whole site with modifications and improvements for that $4 antenna. To be able to operate the satellites, you need to be able to track them. But you don't even need to have software on your computer. You can use either these two sites, the N2YO site or the Heavens Above site. And both of these little icons are links to go to those sites and use these tools. So let's talk about some other VHF UHF activities. Now, I said we were getting away from repeaters, but let's talk about some things you can do with the repeaters that are a little bit out of your everyday usage. And there's a group up in Michigan that started this idea. It isn't my original idea. It's called a repeater crawl, and it's similar to a pub crawl, and we'll talk about that on the next page. You might also use your repeater as a training net for radio operations, and some people even broadcast CW training on their local repeater. Adding an internet backbone or a microwave backbone to your repeater can allow it to be extended, or adding different modes such as Echolink, DMR, D-Star, etc. could increase the area of coverage. So let's talk about the repeater crawl. What they basically do is on a specified night, participants check into a number of local repeaters in a specified order, sort of like a pub crawl. We move from repeater A to repeater B to repeater C. And what they do to keep track of everything is they use an online logging software called NetLogger. But you could also do this with a shared Google spreadsheet or something along those lines. This encourages hams to try new repeaters in their area, to set PL tones, encode and decode for these, and to test to see which repeaters they can actually hit from their location. If they're available, you might want to also consider adding 440, 1.2 gigahertz, 6 meters, and 10 meter FM repeaters to your pub crawl, or to your repeater crawl, I mean. For more information, there's a link here from Keith that you can read more about this. 220 UHF and microwaves have a lot of open space with fairly little activity, and they're a great place for experimentation. You only need one other person with a radio so you can experiment. And there are microwave contest days, and I know there's quite a bit of activity in the Southern California area. So this is something you might want to consider getting involved with. I have a link here with more information on getting started in amateur microwave radio. Now, if you want longer distance, using HF and 6 meters are your best choices other than the satellites. If you start using the 80 meter, 40 meter, and especially the 15 meter CW privileges by learning CW and or using a CW decoding software or hardware, you can make worldwide contacts with your technician class license. If you use 10 meter single sideband when it's open, or try out FT8 and FT4, those are both great ways to make long distance contacts. I just got done making a couple contacts with VKs and ZLs a little early this week on 10 meter FT8. Using 6 meter single sideband and or digital modes can also give you long distance contacts. So let's talk a little bit about CW. Originally, novice CW allocations on 80, 40, and 15 are available to techs. Most techs are not trained in using CW. Unfortunately, not much activity is up on these higher portions of the band, but during contests and other activities, there is activity. You do not need to be a CW expert to make CW contacts. See my presentation called Fun with Morse, and this is the link tiny.cc/FWM. If you're thinking about learning Morse code, I really strongly suggest you have a buddy. Either enroll in a class if there's one in your area, or have another person you work with in person, or on air or online. There's two great online resources out there. The CW Academy has quarterly classes. They put together cohorts of 5 to 7 people, and they teach CW that way. It's a great way to learn. And then the Long Island CW classes have a continuous rotation going on, so you can jump in anytime you want during the year. They have over 50 classes a week that you can pick a time and date that's convenient to you and jump in. And they've just started a new process, so they're working on a continuous basis. You don't have to worry about starting a class when a class starts out. And if you're interested in both of these, I have links for both of them here. The CW Academy is free, but it has a limitation of time and slots. The Long Island CW class requires you to be a member of their club. It's $30 a year or $90 for a lifetime membership. In addition to the CW classes, they also have a number of classes on a wide variety of things, including portable operations, boat anchors, technology. I actually do a class every Tuesday night, which is on hiatus for the summer, called The Joy of Operating, where we talk about just operating and making contacts, not really even focusing on CW any mode. There's also, you can watch this interview with Howard WB2UZE of the Long Island CW group. It's recorded when he did a presentation to the Rat Pack group. We'll skip over that for right now. The digital modes FT8 and FT4 are probably the fastest growing amateur radio mode. They're good with weak signals, poorer antennas, poorer propagations, etc. They're available to technicians on 10 meters, 6 meters, and 2 meters. There's rarely some activity above that on 440, mainly during contests, but 10 meters and 6 meters have activity quite often. Whenever the band's open, there'll be activity there. 2 meters is mainly when there's a contest going on. And I have a whole presentation on FT8 and FT4 if you've not gotten into that. And if you're a general class or higher, you have other bands you can do it on too. So tiny.cc/FT8, FT4. Digital modes, there's some other ones besides FT8 and FT4, PSK31 and RIDI. Both of these would pretty much be limited to 10 meters for technicians, and some other sound card modes. These are, as I said, mostly on 10 meters. Let's talk about 6 meters a little bit. Unlike 10 meters, techs have full privileges, all modes and frequencies. On 10 meters, technicians can use single sideband from 28.3 to 28.5, but there's a lot more band that they're not allowed to use. They also can't use AM, they can't use FM, they can't use 10 meter repeaters. So there is some limitations, but on 6 you can do anything with a technician class license. And 6 can provide regional and even DX when conditions are favorable. When you have high sunspot activity within the F layer, that's a great time to have worldwide communications. But don't forget about the sporadic E layer activity. Sporadic E skip can occur anytime. There tends to be more during the summer, but it can occur anytime. Most newer HF radios already include 6 meters. For more information on HF radios, I have a whole presentation called Buying Amateur Radio Equipment. It's at tiny.cc/buyar. Gain antennas are easily manageable size, but even a simple dipole or J-pole will work on 6 meters when its band is open. Single sideband digital modes are the most common, but there is some CW and FM activity, including both simplex and repeaters. Have a bunch of resources here on 6 meters, including a free book and a website from K5ND. This is him right here. This is Jim Wilson, K5ND. Also information on 6 meters antennas, building the 6 meter Moxon, and 6 meter coaxial dipole antenna, aka the flower pun antenna, which I think is a rather interesting little thing you can easily use in a stealth situation. As I mentioned earlier, technicians have privileges of single sideband from 28.3 to 28.5. And again, high sunspot activity is necessary for really good openings, but there is occasionally some sporadic E activity. Worldwide DX during good times, but when the sunspot cycles at the bottom, 10 meters dries up. The good news is 2020 was the bottom of the sunspot cycle. We are now up here, and actually what's happened, we're actually about 18 months ahead of where we should be, so we've climbed up quite a bit, and we're already up in this area. So don't miss the peak. So get on 10 meters while the propagation is looking good. and this just an article that I wrote for our local newsletter talking about e-skip on 6 meters, 10 meters, and how you can use it anytime, no matter what the sunspot cycle is like. Now, if you're going out and buying a 10-meter radio and you do a web search, you might find a whole bunch of radios that look very similar to this. I call these CB vendor 10-meter radios because they're not CBs. They are 10-meter radios, but they have features designed like CBs, and I don't think they're a great thing for most amateurs to pursue. They will work, but one of the problems is the vast majority of them are FM and AM only. Well, what privileges do technicians have on 10 meters? They don't have AM and they don't have FM. So these would not be suitable for a technician to use on the 10-meter band. Now, there are some single sideband radios out there. Their Lincoln's very popular, but it has very much features of a CB instead of an amateur radio. It's usually channel ties. You can't tune very fine. It's got Roger beeps, no squelch, no antenna tuner, no cat interface. You can't do the digital sound card modes with it very easily. And it doesn't provide 6 meters or other bands for when you upgrade to general. So you're usually much better off buying an inexpensive HF radio that has 10 and 6 in it. And the used market, you can find one very easily, even under $100 if you go back and get an older radio. So I suggest you go that way as opposed to thinking about the CB vendor 10-meter radios. And again, there's a lot more information on the Buy Amateur Radio. Some of the keys to making QSOs on HF, and QSOs are contacts on HF and 6 meters. Know your radio. Knowing the features on your radio make it much better operations. If I'd say which is better, a poor radio that you know how to operate very well, or a great radio that you don't know how to operate very well, I'd pick the poor radio that you know how to use, and you'll probably be more successful. Learn the syntax of typical contacts. They're different than they are in repeaters, so listen to HF for a while and see how other people talk and then mimic what they do. The good things that they do, I should say. You also need to know where to find stations. I spent a lot of time as a novice listening on 10 meters in the middle of the night and not hearing anything, and spending a lot of time on 80 meters during the middle of the day and not hearing anything. I hit it backward. So you need to know how propagation works to know when your best chance to get on. There's something we have available now that I didn't have available back in the early 80s, and that's DX clusters. I can quickly look at a DX cluster and know what bands are open to where very quickly. Let me just slide over here real quick. I'm using the V3 SUN monitor software to monitor different clusters, and I can see that there's a lot of 20-meter CW activity going on right now. That's because there's a contest going on right now also. The Wednesday CW sprint that they have called the CW test. So I could go through this and see what bands are open. And I do see there is some 10-meter activity here. We get that out of the way here. 1 second. It did not like me dragging that across the screen, so just give me a second till I get this out of the way. Okay, there we go. I have a whole presentation on learning how to make that QSO. It's called Get in the Rhythm, Know the Rhyme, and Dance the Dance. And the rhythm is the timing aspect of things, knowing when to drop your call in and how to squeeze in. It's sort of like getting on the freeway. You have to be going the right speed at the right time, and know the rhythm. Know the rhyme is knowing the exchanges so you can operate in contests very easily. And dance the dance is operating the way people expect you to so that you'll be more successful. So you can go through this whole presentation. Even if you don't like competition, operating during contests is a great time to increase your contacts on HFs, 10 meters and 6 meters. There's lots of potential contacts available, and other stations are highly motivated to work you because you're points for them. You don't need to keep track of the exchanges and things they give you if you don't want to participate in the contest, but you do need to know the exchange so you can give it to them so that they'll be happy and be glad that you gave them a contact. There's a wide variety of contests available with different modes different types of stations. If you're new to contesting or never done anything with contesting, I have a slideshow called An Introduction to Amateur Radio Contesting. You can also watch a video recording of it that was done for the ARRL webinar series. And the Chris mentioned earlier that I was working on a class. Well, the class came out last November. If you're an ARRL member, you can take a 6-module class on amateur radio contesting by going to this link. If you don't have a membership, you can sign up for a free trial membership and go through the classes. There's a number of classes there, but I strongly suggest you take the Intro to Amateur Radio Contesting. And you get this nifty little PDF leather-bound book. You're responsible for your own leather. We provide you with the PDF. For information on contesting, probably one of the best sites out there is the WA7BMN site that Bruce Horn puts out. You can click on this and you go there and you can see the different contests that are available this week, next week, etc. And you can also limit it to just different types. So if you want to just see VHF contests, you can do that. Or if you want to see contests that have 10 meters available, you can do that. And Bruce is going to be doing a presentation next Wednesday night for the Rat Pack group, and I'll give you the link for that at the end here. So if you want to see the person that did all this, that'd be a great time to find out more about the contest calendar. I also have some other links here on how to do radio contesting, how to get started. Must you submit a log? The answer is no, you don't have to submit a log. The other people don't get dinged for you not turning a log in. There are maybe a few very, 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 very rare contests that might do that, but the vast majority do not. So feel free to make contacts. And if you want to turn a log in, that's great, but you don't have to. VHF contesting is very similar to HF contesting with very quick exchanges. Points are made per contact and there's multipliers. Usually the multipliers in most VHF, UHF contests are grid squares. And I have a link here to help you find your grid square if you don't know it already. So feel free to use this link to go out there and do that. There's a variety of modes available. Single sideband CW, FT8, and FT4. And we just started to have a little storm here. Fortunately, the lightning isn't here yet. These are the most used frequency ranges on 6, 2 meters, and 70 centimeters for contesting. Single sideband, CW, FM, FT8, and FT4. Now, these calling frequencies are a place to start on FM, but move away to the simplex frequencies after you make contact. One of the biggest differences in VHF contesting from HF contesting include QSY, and quite often when you make a contact with someone on 2 meters, they might ask you, do you have other bands? And if you say yes, they'll say, what about we start on 6 and we go here, and then after they make the contact on 6, do you have 220? Well, no, I don't have 220. What do you have, 430? Yeah, well, let's go ahead and try it, and they'll give you a frequency. So you keep changing frequencies and work as many as you can. Some amateur radio operators during VHF contests move between grids so they can work stations again. This is called roving. Here's some links for the contest. The 4 major VHF, UHF contests in the United States are January, June, and September ARRL contest, and the CQ Worldwide July contest. So the ARRL VHF, UHF contest is coming up very soon here. It's, I think, the second weekend in September. For more VHF, UHF activity, click on this link here from N2SLN. One of the things is the VHF, UHF contest is direct contacts, not through a repeater. Some contests have higher point values for higher frequency bands, but make sure you check the rules for any contest you want to operate on, even if you're not going to be turning a log in. I talked about something your local group can do. We did a DIY VHF, UHF activity that we've been doing for a while. We use it for multiple purposes. We took our local county parks and our park system, and we made abbreviations for each of them, and we have an award for working all the different park locations. That's going on all year, but then a couple times a year we have an activity night where we have everyone go out to a different park instead of having a club meeting, and we use these frequencies: 10 meters single sideband and FM, 6 meters single sideband and FM, 2 meter, and 440 FM only. Now, all these bands except for the FM 10 meters are available to novices, so it allows everyone in the club to participate in this. And if you're interested in more details, there's a link here that you can go to and find out about our activity and the way we do it. It's coming up the first weekend, the second Wednesday in September, but it's going to be a little bit far for you to make contact with us. If you're just getting started out on any band or any mode and you're curious as to why aren't people answering me, I put together a whole presentation for my Joy of Operating class called Successful Operating. And it talks about ways that you can monitor your signal. You can find out how good you sound and ways that you can use other hams. You can use online services. You can use DX clusters. You can use the reverse beacon network, remote software-defined radios. So again, a whole bunch of information on successful operating and evaluating your signal are available at this slideshow. Here's one of the things I mentioned in that. I talk in there extensively about using free online tunable software-defined radios. These allow you to listen without even having a radio or an antenna at your location, but they also allow you to listen remotely to your signal. So you could tune into a SDR in Oklahoma and see how you sound from California, or one in Maine and see how your signal compares to those two different locations. Well, there's my local repeater, but it's just giving its call sign. No one's there. Portable options are great if you have antenna restrictions at home. It's a great way to mix amateur radio with other activities, outdoor activities. And there's amateur radio activities, including de-expeditions to very rare locations, but SOTA, summits on the air, POTA, islands on the air are all things that are very popular with amateur radio operators. And I have a whole presentation on portable operations. Here's information on summits on the air, parks on the air, and islands on the air. Some other activities to try: digital FM modes, DMR, D-Star, System Fusion, Echolink, APRS, fox hunting, building things, especially antennas, are very easy to build for the VHF, UHF bands. Read a book, read a magazine. I read a quarterly article in CQ magazine called The Ham Radio Explorer, and I just talked about FM simplex operation a couple months ago, and 10-meter operation a little before that. If you don't have someone to help you out, get a mentor. And we're going to skip through those. Here's a couple other slideshows that I just did over the last couple of years here. Buying amateur radio equipment, setting up your station, beginner's guide, the VHF and UHF that I mentioned a little earlier. So that's the end. And here's the link again, tiny.cc/btech. That'll give you access to all the resources in the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen sharing here and see if anyone has any questions. Give me a minute to grab the controls here. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Put them in the chat, raise your hand, anything you'd like to do. It says, Phil Carnes. Yes, Phil, I know you have Kiwi SDRs on. So here's the links to Phil's Kiwi SDRs. And if you go to that presentation I had a little bit earlier, it has some information on how to use those software-defined radios.
There are lots of them on the web now. Lots of them.
Yes. There's over 75 on the SDR QSO site alone.
I have a question.
Yes, go right ahead.
This is AI6RR, so I'm the membership chair for PARC. And so the idea of getting a mentor, I think about the other side of it myself, and Charlie in N3V. We've talked a lot about the other side, which is how do we build a collection of people willing to mentor and capable of mentoring. It's obvious from listening to you, you've got a year's worth of information helpful to hams in this one presentation. How do you get people to step up and be mentors?
Well, it usually comes down to, in some cases, assuring them that they don't have to be the mentor for everything. I really talk to people about the idea that, I have like 4 different mentors. When I want information on antennas, I go talk to Steve, because Steve is my antenna guy. And Steve would be very intimidated if he thought he had to mentor me on everything I do, because he's not into computers and technology. When I have questions on, FM equipment, I go talk to to another person and so forth. So by letting people know that as a mentor, you're not required to cover everything. What you're there is to share what you're comfortable with, and then to pass that mentee on to another person. And it's helpful if you know who those other people are to suggest to them. You know, this whole idea of one mentor per person is really puts a lot of strain on the mentor, and it means that a lot of times the mentee is reluctant to go because they don't know if they're asking too many questions. Also, there's nothing wrong with having both in-person mentors, online mentors, you know, and I'm working with a gentleman. We do all of our classes since the beginning of COVID. We've been doing all of our tech and general classes online, and we're going to continue to do them indefinitely that way because we found that we can serve a lot more people. Instead of having 5 to 8 people for our tech class, we had 30 people last time. We had people from all over the U.S. So I've been after I finished up our tech class, I've been working with a gentleman in Maryland, helping him figure out what kind of HF antenna he's going to put up. And this is actually the general class. And we were able to go set up a Zoom session, work together. I brought up Google Maps so I could look at his yard from above, and we figured out where to put a stealth antenna in and how he could get it into the house and all that sort of thing. So the whole idea of mentorship has really changed a lot over the last 10 years. But one of the things, when you were asking about getting people to mentor, assure them that they don't have to know everything to be a mentor.
That's excellent. Thank you. And because I know as I have come into ham radio, usually my question is what to each person I run into is what specific area of ham radio interests you? Because you're right that we have to focus on something. We can't focus on it all. So appreciate that.
You're very welcome. My wife always kids me that when I was young, I asked all the old guys all the questions, and now I must be the old guy because everyone asked me the questions.
Good. Thank you.
More questions? I'd like to make a comment.
Yes, go right ahead, Phil.
Yeah, one of the other things that you can encourage new hams to do is to find new applications for ham radio, not just other ways to communicate, but other uses for communication. And the one that I do a lot and heavily involved in is ballooning. This is an example of something that an individual really can't do any other way. I mean, a cell phone will not work.
Yes.
Excuse me, a plane's flying over. But a cell phone will simply not work with a balloon. Plus, it's not legal. So, ham radio is really the best way to talk to one. So try to find things that can only be done with ham radio. And there still are quite a few of those things.
Yes, and there's a lot of, a lot of times we ignore the fact that there's so much that can be done with the VHF, UHF spectrum. We encourage new hams to upgrade. But what I really want them to do is get active, whether they upgrade or not, because some people, VHF or microwaves might be their cup of tea, and that might be the best thing in the world for them, and they might be doing fabulous things. So I'm definitely not, that one of the things I said you could upgrade, but that's not the thing I'm telling you to do. I'm telling you get active no matter what your license is. Other questions, comments?
I know you talked about APRS, so I just want to kind of give a additional little plug for APRS. It's a fantastic thing for new hams. You can get into it really easily. It is on 2 meter, so you don't need anything but a technician license. The equipment is reasonable considering the alternatives. Some of the other more specialized things are quite expensive, but the APRS is not bad, and it's a lot of fun, especially if you do anything like off-road, which I do, or traveling, hiking in areas that cell phone doesn't work. APRS, I find, usually works pretty well. So thanks for mentioning that one.
That's great. Other comments, questions?
And don't forget, you don't have to operate when you're a ham. You can also do things like experiment and develop technology.
Yes. I have one friend, he's an antenna guru, and he spends more time developing antennas and tweaking antennas, and there's a lot of stations in the Caribbean that are using his antennas, but he doesn't ever contest.
Exactly. I mean, I rarely transmit. I listen all the time, but you know, I rarely transmit. That's just because I happen to like to experiment.
Yeah, see, my favorite thing to do is operate. So I've always been an
And
operator.
all that is fine. All
Yeah.
that is fine. I mean, hams, you know, new hams need to understand that ham radio is this umbrella of lots of little hobbies, and anything some ham enjoys doing is real ham radio.
You know, it was very funny when Marty and I did that series on VHF, UHF. We stressed to them that don't worry too much about that first radio because it's probably not going to be the last radio.
It certainly won't be the last radio.
And you know, in different phases, I spent a lot of time when I first got my license and I lived in an apartment. It was pretty difficult for me to do anything on HF, but I spent a lot of time on Oscar 10. I could simply take my antenna array and put it in a hole that I had in the front yard when the pass was to my east, and in the backyard when the pass was to my west. And when I wasn't operating, put it back into the garage. And I spent a lot of time doing that without anyone really knowing that I was a ham in the area, because they didn't see me most time with my pretty stealth antenna going out and operating.
Oscar 10, that takes me back a ways.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah.
I put a link in here for the Rat Pack presentations. They have over 200 presentations recorded already. They've been doing this for 2 years. So there's about half of them are on emergency communications and the other half are on general topics of interest. So it's tiny.cc/ratpack-list. And that'll give you a list of both the previous sessions and their upcoming sessions.
Speak up. Speak up. Hello?
Yes, Gail.
Yeah, just to share, one of the things I learned when we went to Friedrichshafen and I went to a big YL meeting from the German hams was this: don't be embarrassed and don't be ashamed if you go to a cram class, but it is the obligation of the local club to then teach you. So you cram for the test, you pass it, you walk out and you go, oh, I feel so guilty. I really don't know anything. So then it's up to us, the local club, to guide everyone along and bring them with different people with different areas of expertise. And they were really promoting that in Friedrichshafen a few years ago.
That's great. One of my presentations, I have a fake letter from Hiram Maxim saying congratulations on the new license, but I regret to inform you that it's just a learner's permit. This is just your start at learning. This paper doesn't teach you everything you need to know about amateur radio. This just gives you the chance to learn it. So yes, definitely.
That's perfect.
All right, since we got the screen, I got a comment too.
Yes, go ahead. You pushed Gail right out of the, you just slid her right out of the way there. What'd you do? Swing the screen, or did you push her?
I shoved her out of the way. She's still here.
Okay, very good.
And, two things regarding contesting. You really do need to know the rhythm, because most contesters will definitely slow down and make the contact for you if they're zooming along. But if you don't want to stop, you make sure that you're kind of operating in contest mode. You don't want to say, oh, well, I see your call is 6. Are you from where you from? And la, 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 la. You got to go get the swing of the contest down and do it that way. Otherwise, they'll get frustrated with you. Most contesters will, go along with it, but they still be frustrated in their head.
Yeah, definitely. If you're interested at all in contesting, I really suggest you watch the webinar that I did and take the class. I think you'll find it very useful. It's not really stressing the competitive aspect, and this is also the other one I mentioned earlier: the share the rhythm, share the rhyme. So just talking about something like this is what you need to do to get into a QSO, just like when you're getting on the freeway. And again, it's about the rhythm, the speed, merging into the highway, and then things like knowing your exchange, knowing standard alphabet. These are all things that are useful for contesting or useful for any contest. And here I'm talking about the filler words to avoid, so you don't sound like a contesting noob.
Please copy. It's a great one.
Yes.
Everybody loves it.
And, knowing what the accepted order of exchange is, if anyone out there has ever operated in the ARRL sweepstakes, you know that it's a rather long exchange and everyone expects you to give all the elements in the same order. If you give them out of order, all of a sudden it's confusing the people. So a whole section here this is an example of it. This person gives it the right way here, and thank you. This person gives it the same information, but it's scrambled up, and the person sends it again. So I think this is a pretty useful presentation for anyone that's just getting started out. Using voice inflection and pitch change, knowing when you made a contact and when you didn't make a contact. So that's available at that slideshow, and then also the contesting information at the AWRL class.
And you said about the logs. I actually worked a few contacts in a contest because I was busy the weekend or whatever. I probably made 25, 30 contacts, and I didn't submit a log. And about a week later, I got an email from the contest sponsor. Could you please submit your log, because you're showing up in everybody else's log. So we need your confirmation of your end.
I was in Albuquerque.
It wouldn't have hurt them either way if I did or did not, but I sent it in. So
I was in Albuquerque for a contest a few years back, and for a conference, and I arrived there on Sunday, and the conference was starting on Monday, but it was the Sunday of the AWRL June VHF UHF contest, and I had my Yaesu F817 and that rubber duck that comes with it that's good on 6 meters and 2 meters. And I took that rubber duck and I went out on the balcony of the hotel, and I ended up using the railing and this downspouting as reflectors and directors. And I worked about 18 contacts, and I sent my log in, and I came in first in the New Mexico QRP category. So I got a certificate for it. So, you never know, but it was just fun. And I was using the most unlikely thing for the contest, that running 5 watts with a rubber duck, but it was still, when the conditions are right. Persistence is a big thing too. I'm now at about 104,000 contacts, 5 watts or less. I started out with 2-watt radio, and no one told me you weren't supposed to start out that way as a novice. So 41 years later, I'm still operating the same way.
What's the contest in, I think it's July, where you give your name and state?
There's a lot of contests there's a lot of contests to do. That's the North American QSO party. By the way, you don't need to use your real name. I don't like Tony. To me, Tony is just like, you might as well call me Bob. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I actually use my initials, and everyone thinks I'm using Al, A-L, but it's actually just my initials that I use. And it's much shorter than Anthony, and people don't ever ask me for repeats on Al, on CW or phone, but I always get repeats on Anthony, so it takes too long to send. So you can use and all that information, I talk about all that in the series for the AWRL class. So next Tuesday, I'm going to be back in California again. I'll be at Seal Beach ARS group. And then I think the week after that, I'm in Iowa for the Cedar Valley group. All my presentations that I have available are at my this link that I'm going to send out, tiny.cc/K8ZT-P. And that'll get you access to all of my different slideshows. Some of them have recordings with them, some don't, but most of them do.
All right.
And there's even a UK version of this. They asked me to do this talk, but their bands are a lot different. Their foundation license is similar to our technician license, but instead of limiting the bands that you can operate on, they just limit the power. So they have access to all the HF bands, but only 10 watts, which I think is a much wiser way to do it, as opposed to putting the technicians into just small sections of band or some bands. But that's the way that they do their limitation for their license. Any other questions, comments? Well, thank you all. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you. Anthony, you prefer?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Anthony, for that presentation. Very informative. I'm seeing some thumbs up. I changed this back to the grid view so we can see everybody. So, fantastic presentation, really informative. It is stored on our YouTube, so you can go back to youtube.com/PalomarARC and look at the previous videos to see this and other presentations. We'll also put a link directly to this presentation and the copious amounts of links that came through the chat in our September scope.
Thank you.
The next thing that we have is the picnic, aside from the board meeting, but the next event that the club has is the picnic 1 month from today on September 3rd. And again, that is a Saturday. It is at San Dieguito Park, Area 4. And then the Wednesday following will be our September club meeting. So that's going to be Wednesday, September 7th. And we're hoping to have that in person, but like I said, keep an eye on palomararc.org for updates about if we are going to for sure be back in the room or do this again. Chris, do we have, wait, is Chris still here? Yeah, there you are. Chris, do we have anybody on deck for September? What's the plan there?
I do not, and I will have somebody soon.
Okay, so we may do that, the party in September then, Mark. Does that sound good? The programming party?
Oh, we've been waiting for what, three months to do it. I suggest we discuss it at the board meeting, Chris, before you do anything else.
Okay.
Okay. Great.
For all of the rest of you folks over here, I'm trying to get organized a couple of times a year where it's actually more of a social than a presentation. And we're going to get Glenn, myself, and John to bring a bunch of test equipment. And I have Chirp, and I have the ability to do Bofangs and Yaesu, some Yaesus. And we can program radios, we can test antennas. I'm trying to get a little micro printer working so that I can print the antenna characteristics and give them to you. We can measure deviation, we can measure frequency offset. So if we get to do this, guys, bring radios, bring antennas, bring stuff that you want to know about, and we can measure it right there. And bring food.
And questions. Bring questions.
Oh yeah,
All right.
definitely bring questions.
More info on next month program will be forthcoming, and we'll try to get that scope out a little bit earlier than we did this month. Great. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you at the picnic or the next meeting. Glad to see all your faces.
Thanks again, Anthony.